John and Sarah had lived in their home for 15 years, and their kitchen had seen better days. The once white cabinets had turned yellow, the countertops were scratched, and their storage space was a nightmare. But what bothered Sarah the most was how their teenage daughter Emma refused to spend time in the kitchen anymore. "Mom, it's so embarrassing. I can't even take photos in here for my social media," Emma would say. The kitchen had become the family's biggest pain point, but they thought a luxury renovation would cost them a fortune. One evening, while scrolling through her phone, Sarah saw a video of a kitchen transformation that made her jaw drop. She couldn't believe it was the same space. The gleaming countertops, the hidden storage solutions, and something she had never seen before, a backsplash that changed colors with just a voice command. "John, come look at this," she called out excitedly. John walked over, expecting to see another unrealistic renovation video, but what he saw left him speechless. The next day, they decided to visit a kitchen showroom, just to get some ideas. That's where they met Mike, a kitchen designer who had transformed over 500 kitchens in the past year. As they walked around, Mike noticed how Sarah kept touching the smooth surfaces of the demo kitchen. "You know," he said with a knowing smile, "what you see here isn't even our most impressive design. The real magic happens when we combine these elements in unexpected ways." Mike pulled out his tablet and showed them a kitchen he had just finished. This family had the same concerns as you: limited budget, worried about space, and a teenager who thought their kitchen was ancient history. Sarah and John exchanged glances. This was exactly their situation. But what Mike said next changed everything. "Would you believe me if I told you that this luxury kitchen actually helped the family save money every month?" Sarah looked confused. "Save money? How is that possible?" Mike's eyes sparkled as he walked them to a private consultation room. "Let me show you something that none of my competitors are talking about. It's a new approach we developed for 2025, and it's revolutionizing how families use their kitchens." He closed the door behind them, pulled out some blueprints, and what he revealed next would prove to be just the beginning of an amazing transformation journey. "But before I explain this money-saving secret," Mike said, reaching for another folder, "there's something even more important you need to know about modern kitchens that might surprise you." He paused, looking at their eager faces, knowing that what he was about to share would completely change their perspective on what was possible for their family's kitchen. Mike opened the folder and spread out several photos on the table. "Look at this kitchen," he said, pointing to a stunning space that seemed to glow from within. "Would you believe this used to be half the size of your current kitchen?" Sarah leaned in closer, her eyes wide with disbelief. The kitchen in the photo had sleek cabinets that seemed to disappear into the walls, and a backsplash that shimmered like morning sunlight on water. "The secret isn't in making your kitchen bigger," Mike explained, "it's in making it smarter." He pulled out his phone and showed them a video. With just 3 simple voice commands, entire sections of the kitchen transformed. Storage spaces emerged from what looked like solid walls. A coffee station silently glided out from behind a panel, complete with everything needed for the perfect morning brew. "This is what we call invisible luxury," Mike said proudly. But what really caught John's attention was something else. "Notice anything unusual about the lighting?" Mike asked. John shook his head. "Exactly. You don't see any light fixtures, yet every corner is perfectly lit." Mike touched the backsplash in the video, and suddenly, the entire kitchen's atmosphere changed from bright morning light to a cozy evening glow. "This smart lighting system alone cuts electricity bills by 40%, he revealed. Sarah was impressed but still skeptical. "This must cost a fortune," she said quietly. Mike smiled and pulled out a cost comparison sheet. "That's the biggest misconception about luxury kitchens in 2025. Let me show you something that will change your mind." He started explaining about new materials that had just hit the market, materials that looked like expensive marble but were actually more durable and cost just a fraction of the price. "But here's what really makes this interesting," Mike continued, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Remember how Emma doesn't like spending time in your kitchen?" Sarah nodded sadly. "Well, we had another family with the same problem. Their daughter Lisa used to avoid the kitchen completely. But after we installed this," he reached for another folder, but then stopped. Actually, before I show you this, there's something even more important you need to understand about modern kitchens. Something that's going to sound impossible at first. The door to the consultation room opened, and another designer poked her head in. Mike, that kitchen you did last month, the Petersons, they're here, and you won't believe what they're saying about their energy bills. Mike's eyes lit up. Perfect timing. Would you like to meet them? He asked Sarah and John. They can tell you themselves about what happened after just 1 month of using their new kitchen. Sarah and John looked at each other with growing excitement. What had seemed like a simple kitchen renovation was turning into something much more intriguing. And they had a feeling they were about to discover something that would change not just their kitchen, but their entire family's way of living. The Petersons turned out to be a friendly couple in their 40s. Mrs. Peterson couldn't stop smiling as she pulled out her phone. Look at this, she said, showing Sarah her utility bill. Our bills dropped by 60% since the renovation. But that's not even the best part. She scrolled through her photos to show Sarah something else, dozens of pictures of her family gathered in their new kitchen, laughing, cooking, and enjoying time together. Remember how I told you about the smart materials? Mike jumped in. Well, the Petersons' kitchen has something even more special. He nodded to Mr. Peterson, who grinned and pulled out his own phone. With one simple voice command, their kitchen counters adjusted height. My mother uses a wheelchair, Mr. Peterson explained. Before, she could never help with cooking. Now she comes over every Sunday for family dinner prep. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. Her own mother had arthritis and had slowly stopped coming over to cook together, something they used to love doing. John squeezed her hand, knowing exactly what she was thinking. But Mike wasn't finished with the surprises. The adaptive counter height is impressive, Mike said, but wait until you see what happens in the evening. Mrs. Peterson swiped to another video. The same kitchen was now transformed into what looked like a cozy cafe. The backsplash had turned into a gentle waterfall of soft lights, and part of the counter had become what looked like a homework station. Our teenagers used to hide in their rooms after dinner, Mrs. Peterson shared. Now they actually fight over who gets to use the kitchen's study nook. The smart lighting helps them focus, and she paused, looking at Mike. Should I tell them about the motivation feature? Mike nodded enthusiastically. Show them the grades video. Mrs. Peterson pulled up another clip. The kitchen's smart display showed a progress chart, and with each improved grade, the kitchen's lighting celebrated with a personal light show. The kids started doing their homework in the kitchen just for the light shows, she laughed. But then their grades actually improved because they weren't studying alone in their rooms anymore. John's eyes widened. Emma's struggling with her math, he whispered to Sarah. Their daughter had been falling behind, spending hours alone in her room supposedly studying, but her grades kept dropping. The thought of her studying in a space like this, where they could casually check on her while preparing dinner. But Mike raised his hand before they could get too excited. There's something else you need to see first. Something that makes all of this look basic in comparison. He turned to the Petersons. Have you shown them your kitchen's morning mode yet? Mrs. Peterson shook her head, a mysterious smile on her face. Oh, they're not ready for that yet. Show them the storage solution first, that's what convinced us to go ahead with the renovation. She turned to Sarah and John. Trust me, what they're about to show you. It's going to change everything you think you know about kitchen organization. Mike led them back to the showroom floor, but this time he took them to a door marked, Preview Room, 2025 models. Inside was what looked like a very normal, even basic kitchen. Sarah felt slightly disappointed after seeing the Petersons' amazing space. But then Mike pressed what looked like a regular power outlet. The entire room came to life. What they had thought was a solid wall slid open silently, revealing a hidden pantry that would make any chef jealous. But this wasn't just any pantry, every shelf was perfectly lit, and digital displays showed expiration dates for each item. No more waste, Mike explained. The system tracks everything and sends alerts to your phone when something needs to be used up. Watch this, he said, picking up an empty cereal box. As soon as he threw it in the trash, the kitchen's smart display automatically added cereal to the shopping list. But the real magic happened when he showed them the cost tracking feature. Every time you throw away expired food, it shows you exactly how much money you wasted. The average family saves over $300 monthly just by preventing food waste. Sarah's mind raced to all the vegetables she'd thrown out just last week. Their grocery bills had been getting higher and higher, and now she understood why. But John was more interested in something else he'd noticed. "Where's the fridge?" he asked, looking around the space. Mike smiled that knowing smile again. He walked to what looked like a regular cabinet and placed his hand on it. The surface lit up with a soft blue glow, and the panel slid aside to reveal the most innovative refrigerator they'd ever seen. Traditional refrigerators waste energy by letting cold air escape every time you open them, he explained. This compartment system means you only open the small section you need. Just then, Mrs. Peterson poked her head into the room. "Show them the breakfast feature," she called out excitedly. Mike chuckled. "I was saving that for later, but..." He walked to the center island and tapped its surface twice. The countertop transformed into a cooking guide, complete with step-by-step instructions and measurements that projected right onto the surface. "But here's the part that sold the Petersons," Mike said. He pulled out what looked like an ordinary coffee mug and placed it on the counter. Instantly, the surface around it lit up with a soft glow, and a gentle voice announced, "Good morning. Would you like your usual morning coffee?" John's jaw dropped. "The kitchen learns your family's preferences and routines," Mike explained. "It knows that John likes his coffee strong in the morning but milder in the evening." Sarah was about to ask how it worked when she noticed something else, a section of the wall that seemed to be breathing. Mike saw her staring and grinned. "Ah, you noticed our biggest breakthrough for 2025. But before I show you that..." He paused, building suspense. Have you ever wondered why luxury hotels always feel so different from regular kitchens? It's not just about the expensive appliances. There's a secret that top designers have been using for years, and we've finally found a way to bring it into homes. The breathing wall panel shifted slightly, and Sarah could have sworn she heard a faint melody coming from behind it. What they were about to discover would make everything they'd seen so far seem ordinary in comparison. Mike walked over to the breathing wall and placed his palm flat against it. The surface rippled like water, and slowly, the panel melted away to reveal something that made Sarah gasp. Behind it was a vertical garden, but unlike anything they'd seen before. Fresh herbs, vegetables, and even small fruit plants grew in perfectly arranged rows, bathed in a soft, natural-looking light. "This is what we call the living kitchen," Mike said proudly. "Those luxury hotels I mentioned, they always have the freshest ingredients because they grow them right in their kitchens. We've taken that concept and made it work for regular homes." He plucked a fresh basil leaf and handed it to Sarah. The aroma was incredible. "But that's not even the clever part," he continued. He touched another panel, and suddenly, the garden section rotated, revealing a different set of plants on the other side. The system knows what you cook most often and grows exactly what your family needs. If Sarah loves Italian cooking, it grows more basil and tomatoes. If Emma wants strawberries for her smoothies, it adjusts to grow those. John, ever practical, looked concerned. "But the maintenance," he started to say. Mike laughed. "That's the beauty of it. The system is completely self-maintaining. It waters the plants, adjusts the light, and even harvests when things are perfectly ripe. All you do is collect fresh ingredients when you need them." He showed them a small display that monitored each plant's progress and predicted harvest dates. Just then, they heard excited voices from the showroom. The Petersons were showing another couple their photos, and Mrs. Peterson called out, "Mike, show them what happened when we hosted our first dinner party." Mike turned to Sarah and John with a twinkle in his eye. "Want to see something really special?" He led them back to the main kitchen area and pulled up a video on the smart display. It showed the Petersons' kitchen transforming for a party. The backsplash turned into a subtle light show, the counters adjusted to create a perfect buffet setup, and most surprisingly, part of the ceiling dropped down to reveal hidden mood lighting. "Every family that installs our living kitchen system ends up saving between 30 to 40% on their grocery bills," Mike explained. But what they don't expect is how it changes their social life. He showed them more photos of families gathering in their new kitchens, kids doing homework while parents cooked, and friends enjoying dinner parties. Sarah's mind was racing with possibilities. Their kitchen had always been too cramped for entertaining, and Emma had stopped inviting friends over because she was embarrassed by how outdated everything looked. But before she could say anything, Mike held up his hand. "I know what you're thinking," he said, "but there's something else you need to see first. Remember how I said this was just the beginning?" He walked over to what looked like a regular wall and pressed his hand against it. A soft humming sound filled the air, and the wall began to shimmer. This next feature. Well, it's why we had to sign an NDA with every client this year. What I'm about to show you is actually still in the testing phase, but the results have been incredible. The wall continued to shimmer, and Sarah could have sworn she saw something moving behind it. The air in the room felt different somehow, charged with possibility. Whatever was behind that wall was about to change everything they thought they knew about modern kitchens. The shimmering wall slowly became transparent, revealing what looked like a window, but they were in the middle of the building. "This is what we call the Infinity Kitchen," Mike said softly. Through the window, they could see a perfect view of a sunset over mountains, complete with gentle breezes that actually moved Sarah's hair. The smart wall can transform your kitchen view to anything you want, and yes, you can feel the environment too. Mrs. Peterson appeared again, practically bouncing with excitement. "Show them the recipe feature," she insisted. Mike smiled and spoke to the wall. "Italian countryside, cooking mode." Suddenly, they were standing in what felt like a traditional Italian kitchen. An elderly Italian woman appeared, looking as real as if she were standing right there. "This is Maria," Mike explained. "She's a real chef from Tuscany who recorded hundreds of authentic recipes for our system." The holographic chef started preparing pasta, her movements perfectly clear. As she worked, the smart countertop lit up with measurements and instructions. "The best part," Mike continued, "the system adjusts recipes based on your dietary needs and preferences. If someone's gluten-free or has allergies, it automatically modifies the recipe while keeping the authentic taste." John, who had been quiet for a while, finally spoke up. "But the cost," he started. Mike raised his hand. "Remember the energy savings I mentioned? Well, here's what we didn't tell you yet." He pulled up some numbers on the display. "The Infinity Kitchen doesn't just save you money on groceries and energy. It actually helps you earn it back." He showed them how families were using their new kitchens to host cooking classes, create food blogs, and even rent the space for small events. The Petersons made back 40% of their investment in the first year just by hosting virtual cooking classes. Their daughter, about Emma's age, started a YouTube channel showcasing the kitchen's features, and now she's got 100,000 followers. Sarah's eyes widened. Emma had always talked about wanting to start a food blog but felt their kitchen wasn't Instagram-worthy. Now she imagined her daughter hosting cooking shows with a famous Italian chef, or learning French cuisine with a view of Paris behind her. But Mike wasn't finished. He touched another panel, and the room transformed again. "This is where it gets really interesting," he said. "We've partnered with top culinary schools worldwide. Teenagers can take virtual cooking classes that count as college credits. One of our clients' daughters got a full scholarship to culinary school based on the portfolio she created in their kitchen." Just then, they heard a commotion from the showroom. A family was leaving, all of them beaming. Mike glanced out and his face lit up. "Perfect timing," he said. "That family just had their 1-month review. But before I tell you about their experience..." He paused, looking serious. "There's something else you should know. Something that none of our competitors are even close to figuring out." He walked to what appeared to be a normal kitchen cabinet and placed his hand on it. A soft blue glow appeared under his palm, and they heard what sounded like crystals chiming. "This," he said, "is what happens when artificial intelligence meets ancient cooking wisdom." The cabinet door swung open silently, revealing what looked like a traditional spice rack. But as Mike pulled it out, soft blue lights began pulsing beneath each jar. "This is the Wisdom Kitchen system," he explained. "We worked with master chefs from 15 different cultures to capture generations of cooking knowledge. Each spice jar lit up with a different color, creating a beautiful light dance. "Watch this," Mike said, picking up a jar of turmeric. The smart wall instantly transformed into a scene from an Indian kitchen, where a grandmother was teaching her family ancient recipes. "Every spice tells a story," Mike explained, "but more importantly, it knows exactly how to combine with others for perfect flavor and health benefits." He demonstrated by placing 3 spice jars on the counter. The surface lit up with connecting lines between them, showing how these spices work together. "If someone in your family has a cold," he explained, "the system suggests ancient remedy combinations that have been used for generations. It's like having 1,000 grandmothers' wisdom in your kitchen." Mrs. Peterson appeared again, this time with her phone showing photos of her family. "Show them the memory feature," she insisted. Mike smiled and picked up what looked like a regular recipe box. As he opened it, a holographic display appeared above it, showing family photos and handwritten recipe cards. "This is the family legacy feature," he said softly. "It preserves your family's cooking traditions and stories." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she thought about her grandmother's old recipes, stuffed in a drawer somewhere. "The system can scan old handwritten recipes," Mike continued, seeming to read her mind, "and not only digitize them but analyze the ingredients to suggest modern healthy alternatives while keeping the original taste." Just then, they heard teenage laughter from the showroom. The Petersons' daughter was showing something on her phone to other teens who had gathered around her. "That's another surprise," Mike said. Teenagers who thought cooking was boring are now creating recipe remixes, taking ancient family recipes and giving them modern twists. They're going viral on social media. He turned back to the spice rack and pulled out one final jar. It looked empty, but as he held it up, the entire room filled with a soft golden light. "This is where tradition meets the future," he said mysteriously. "We discovered something incredible when we studied these ancient cooking methods. Something that modern science is just beginning to understand." The golden light seemed to pulse with energy, and Sarah could have sworn she smelled her grandmother's famous apple pie. But before she could ask about it, Mike held up his hand. "Before I explain this part," he said, "I need to show you something even more extraordinary. Something that happened by accident when we were testing this system." He walked over to the central island, where a simple glass of water sat. "Watch carefully," he said, reaching for what looked like an ordinary kitchen timer. "This is going to challenge everything you think you know about how food and emotions connect." The water in the glass began to ripple, though no one had touched it. The water in the glass continued to ripple, and suddenly tiny particles of light began dancing through it. "What you're seeing," Mike explained, "is what we call the emotional resonance feature." He took out a small pendant and placed it near the glass. The water's movement changed, creating beautiful patterns that reflected on the walls. "We discovered this by accident," Mike continued. "One of our test kitchens had a grandmother cooking with her grandchildren. Every time she made her special recipes, the sensors in our system picked up unusual energy patterns. At first, we thought it was a glitch." He smiled, touching the pendant. "It wasn't a glitch. It was love." The Petersons' daughter stepped in, holding her phone. "Show them my viral video," she said excitedly. She pulled up a TikTok that had over 2 million views. She was cooking her grandmother's cookie recipe while wearing the pendant. The kitchen's lights responded to her movements, creating a beautiful light show that matched her emotions. "The pendant reads your emotional state while you cook," Mike explained. "Happy memories, love, joy, they all create different patterns. But here's the incredible part." He pulled up data on the smart display. "Food prepared in this emotional state actually tastes different. We did blind taste tests. The same recipe, cooked the exact same way, tastes better when prepared with positive emotions." Sarah thought about her mother's cooking, how it always tasted better than her own even when using the same recipe. "But there's more," Mike said. He touched the pendant again, and the kitchen's atmosphere changed completely. Soft lights pulsed in a gentle rhythm, and the air felt somehow cleaner, fresher. The system doesn't just read emotions, it can help create them. He showed them how the kitchen could generate calming environments for stressed family members, energizing spaces for morning routines, or focus zones for homework time. One family reported their teenage son's anxiety attacks decreased by 70% after they installed the system. Just then, they heard a commotion from the showroom. A young girl about Emma's age was jumping up and down excitedly. Mike grinned. Perfect timing. That's Lily, she just won her school's science fair with a project about our kitchen's emotional resonance patterns. The Petersons joined them again, this time with their daughter holding what looked like a normal cooking spoon. Should we show them the memory capture feature? Mrs. Peterson asked Mike. He nodded slowly. But first, he said, turning back to Sarah and John, there's something else you need to understand. Something that explains why these kitchens are changing families in ways we never expected. He walked over to a simple wooden box on the counter. As he opened it, a soft symphony of lights and sounds filled the room. This, he said quietly, is what happens when a kitchen can store and replay the happiest moments of your family's life. The air seemed to sparkle with possibility as Mike reached into the box. From the wooden box, Mike pulled out what looked like an ordinary family photo album. But when he opened it, holographic memories sprang to life above the pages. Every special moment in your kitchen gets captured and stored, he explained. Not just photos or videos, but the entire feeling of the moment. The first memory showed a family Christmas morning. The incredible thing was that you could actually smell the cinnamon rolls baking and feel the warmth of the oven. The system captures everything, the sounds, the smells, even the temperature of the room, Mike said. You can replay your happiest family moments exactly as they happened. Mrs. Peterson wiped away a tear as she watched one of her memories play out, her daughter's first successful cake, complete with the proud smile and flower-covered hands. But watch this, she said, touching the album page. Suddenly, the recipe appeared in mid-air, along with all the emotions her daughter had felt while baking. Now when she makes it, she can feel exactly what I was feeling when I taught her. That's amazing, Sarah whispered, thinking of her own mother's recipes. But Mike held up his hand. You haven't seen the most powerful feature yet. He turned to another page in the album, and suddenly the room was filled with the sound of children's laughter. A memory played showing 3 generations of the Peterson family cooking together. The kitchen doesn't just record these moments, Mike explained. It learns from them. It starts to understand what makes your family happiest and adjusts itself automatically. He showed them how the system had learned the perfect lighting for homework time, the ideal temperature for family dinners, even the best background music for different activities. Just then, they heard a familiar voice from the showroom. Mom, Dad? It was Emma. She had come looking for them after her study group. As she walked into the room, the kitchen's systems immediately responded to her presence. The lighting softened to her preferred level, and her favorite study playlist began playing softly in the background. Emma's eyes went wide as she saw the holographic memories floating in the air. This is insane, she breathed, pulling out her phone to capture it. Mike smiled knowingly. Watch this, he said, pressing a button on the album. Suddenly, the kitchen transformed into what looked like a professional cooking show set. Every teenager who has this system can create their own cooking channel, complete with professional lighting and effects. Emma's face lit up as she saw the possibilities, but Mike wasn't finished. He turned to the last page of the album. There's one more thing you need to see, he said quietly. Something we discovered just last week. Something that could change everything about how families connect. He placed his hand on the final page, and the air began to shimmer with a strange, beautiful light. What you're about to see, he said, is the real reason why every family who has installed this kitchen says their lives have completely changed. The light grew stronger, and in its glow, they could see something beginning to take shape. The shimmering light transformed into what looked like a bridge between 2 kitchens. On the other side, Sarah gasped as she saw her mother's kitchen, not as it was now, but as it had been years ago when Sarah was a child. This is the family bridge, Mike explained softly. It connects kitchens across any distance. Through the light bridge, they could see Sarah's mother in her own kitchen, cooking and smiling. We've partnered with retirement communities and homes across the country, Mike said. When you install this kitchen, your parents or grandparents can get a simplified version installed in their home, at no extra cost. Mrs. Peterson stepped forward, her eyes shining. This is how my mother, who lives 3 states away, teaches my daughter to make her special recipes, she said. They cook together every Sunday, as if they're in the same kitchen. The system synchronizes everything. When my mother's oven is at 350 degrees, so is ours. When she adds a pinch of salt, our smart containers show exactly how much that pinch should be. Emma moved closer to the bridge, fascinated. The younger generation spends so much time on their phones, Mike explained, but this brings them back to the kitchen. They can cook with grandparents, share recipes with friends, even take cooking classes from famous chefs, all in real time, as if they're cooking side by side. Sarah thought about her mother, who had stopped visiting because the drive was too hard on her arthritis. Now they could cook together every day if they wanted to. John watched his wife's face and knew exactly what she was thinking. But here's what really makes this special, Mike said, pressing one final button on the memory album. The kitchen filled with a soft golden light, and suddenly they could hear laughter, not just from one family, but from many. The walls displayed scenes of families cooking together across distances, sharing meals, telling stories, and creating memories. Every family who has installed this kitchen reports the same thing, Mike said quietly. Their grocery bills go down. Their energy bills drop. Their children spend more time at home. But most importantly, he paused, looking at each of them, they say their family has never felt closer. He closed the album gently, and the scenes faded. So, he said with a warm smile, would you like to see what your kitchen could become? Emma, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke up. Mom, Dad. Please, she said softly. I want to cook with Grandma again. Sarah and John looked at each other, then at their daughter, and finally at the kitchen around them. They didn't need to say anything. The decision had already been made in their hearts. Mike picked up his tablet, ready to show them the next steps. Welcome, he said, to your family's new future.